Klimt's golden era. Imagine a city shimmering on the cusp of a new century, a place where horse-drawn carriages share the cobblestones with the first sputtering automobiles. This is Vienna at the turn of the 20th century, the glittering, neurotic, and brilliant heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was a city of radical contradictions, of opulent balls and groundbreaking psychoanalysis, of imperial tradition and artistic rebellion. And at the very center of this cultural explosion was one man who would come to define its aesthetic, Gustav Klimt. To understand the story of a lost painting, we must first understand the world that created it and the artist who dipped his brush in gold and controversy. Klimt was more than just a painter, he was a revolutionary. In 1897, he and a group of like-minded artists, architects, and designers broke away from the conservative, state-sponsored art institutions. They formed the Vienna Secession, a movement whose motto, emblazoned above the entrance to their iconic exhibition hall, declared their mission: to the age its art, to art its freedom. This wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was a declaration of war on the stuffy, academic art that had dominated for centuries. They sought to create a total work of art, where painting, sculpture, and architecture would merge into a single, immersive experience. They championed symbolism, psychological depth, and a sensuality that often scandalized the Viennese establishment. This rebellion gave birth to Klimt's most famous period, his golden phase. Inspired by a trip to Ravenna, Italy, where he was mesmerized by the glittering Byzantine mosaics, Klimt began incorporating gold leaf directly into his canvases. The result was an art that felt both ancient and shockingly modern. Think of his iconic 1907 masterpiece, The Kiss. It's not just a painting of two lovers, it's a shimmering icon, a sacred image where human passion is elevated to something divine and eternal. The same year, he completed the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer I, a work so encrusted with gold and intricate patterns that the subject almost dissolves into a celestial constellation of her own wealth and status. This was what Klimt did best. He captured the soul of Vienna's elite, particularly its powerful, intelligent, and increasingly visible women, and transformed them into modern goddesses. But by 1917, the world had changed. The guns of the First World War had been thundering across Europe for 3 years, and the gilded optimism of the Belle Epoque had shattered. Klimt's art changed with it. His golden phase was largely behind him. He put away the gold leaf and began exploring a new language of vibrant, almost fauvist color and dense, hypnotic patterns, inspired by Asian and Persian textiles. His late works are marked by a raw, expressive energy, a different kind of sensuality that was less iconic and more intimately human. It was in this final, feverish period of creativity that he began work on a portrait that would become one of art history's greatest mysteries, the portrait of Fräulein Lieser. The Lieser family was a dynasty of the Austro-Hungarian industrial elite. They were part of the highly acculturated Jewish bourgeoisie, patrons of the arts and sciences who were integral to Vienna's cultural and economic life. Adolf and Justus Lieser were titans of the textile industry, their wealth allowing them to commission works from the most sought-after artist in the empire. In 1917, one of their family members sat for Klimt. For nearly a century, the identity of this Fräulein Lieser was debated. The only clue was a note on the back of a black-and-white photograph from the 1920s attributing the portrait to a member of the family. Was it Helene, the eldest daughter of Henrietta Lieser, or one of Justus's two daughters, Annie or Margareta? recent scholarship points strongly towards Margareta Constance Leser, a spirited and intelligent young woman who was active in art circles. Klimt worked on the portrait in his studio, capturing the young woman's direct, confident gaze. He rendered her face with a delicate naturalism that stands in stark contrast to the explosion of color and pattern that is her dress. A magnificent floral shawl, rendered in brilliant shades of scarlet, saffron, and cobalt blue, drapes over her shoulders. The background is a tempest of fiery red, left tantalizingly unfinished. This lack of completion adds a layer of poignant immediacy to the work. In February 1918, Gustav Klimt died from a stroke and the subsequent pneumonia epidemic that swept Europe. He left the portrait of Fräulein Leser in his studio, a masterpiece on the easel, the final brushstrokes never to be applied. The painting was given to the family who commissioned it, a final, brilliant testament to Klimt's genius. It was exhibited once, in 1925, and a single black and white photograph was taken. And then, after 1925, it vanished. The vibrant masterpiece, a symbol of a sophisticated and confident culture, disappeared from public view, just as the world it represented was about to be consumed by darkness. Block 2. Vanished Masterpiece, World War II. After its brief moment in the public eye in 1925, the portrait of Fräulein Leser became a ghost. It existed only as a grainy black and white photograph in art history archives, a tantalizing specter of a lost masterpiece. For decades, its vibrant colors were left to the imagination, its fate a complete and utter mystery. To understand how a painting of such significance could simply evaporate, we have to look at the catastrophic historical forces that were gathering storm clouds over Europe. The Vienna that had nurtured Klimt and the Leser family was about to be systematically dismantled, its intellectual and cultural vibrancy replaced by a brutal, totalitarian ideology. The critical turning point was the Anschluss of 1938, when Nazi Germany annexed Austria. Almost overnight, the lives of Austria's 200,000 Jews were irrevocably shattered. The Leser family, once titans of industry and celebrated patrons of the arts, were now targets. Their story is a tragic microcosm of what happened to countless others. Their businesses were subject to Aryanization, a euphemism for the state-sanctioned theft of Jewish-owned property. Their bank accounts were frozen, their rights stripped away, and their very existence criminalized. The last known legal owner of the painting was likely Henrietta Amalie Leser-Landau, known as Lily. She was a prominent figure in Viennese society, a patron of composers like Arnold Schönberg, and a woman of immense culture. After the Anschluss, her world collapsed. She was trapped. Her daughters, Annie and Helene, managed to escape Austria, but Lily stayed behind. In 1942, she was deported. Her journey ended in the gas chambers of Auschwitz in 1943. A life filled with art, music, and philanthropy was extinguished by the machinery of the Holocaust. And with her death, the direct, clear line of ownership for the Klimt portrait was violently severed. This personal tragedy was part of a much larger, systematic campaign of plunder. The Nazis were not just murderers, they were obsessive, meticulous thieves. Adolf Hitler, a failed artist himself, envisioned a massive Führermuseum in his hometown of Linz, which he planned to fill with the greatest artistic treasures of the world, stolen, of course, from museums and private collections across Europe. His second-in-command, Hermann Göring, was also an insatiable art collector, amassing a personal hoard of thousands of looted works. Special units, like the notorious Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, or ERR, were tasked with systematically confiscating cultural property, particularly from Jewish families. They created vast inventories, photographing and cataloging their loot with chilling bureaucratic precision. However, not all art was taken at gunpoint. The Nazis perfected a more insidious method of theft, the forced sale. As Jewish families grew more desperate to flee, they were subjected to punitive flight taxes. To pay them, they were often forced to sell their most valuable possessions, homes, businesses, and art, for a pittance. These transactions were given a veneer of legality, with contracts and bills of sale, but they were conducted under extreme duress. A family might be allowed to sell a masterpiece worth millions for the price of a single exit visa. This created a profound and lasting problem in the art world. A painting that appears to have a legitimate sales record from the late 1930s could, in fact, be stolen property. This legal gray area has complicated restitution efforts for decades, as it becomes incredibly difficult to prove whether a sale was a genuine business transaction or an act of extortion. For nearly a century, the fate of the portrait of Fräulein Leser was a subject of speculation. Had it been destroyed in an Allied bombing raid? Was it seized by the ERR and hidden away in a salt mine like the thousands of other treasures discovered by the monuments men after the war? Or, perhaps most likely, did it slip into a private collection, its new owners either unaware of or deliberately concealing its dark and tragic provenance? The complete lack of any documentation after 1925 meant that all trails went cold. The painting was swallowed by the chaos of war and the silence that followed. It became one of the great lost works of the 20th century, a symbol not just of Klimt's genius, but of the immense cultural heritage that was annihilated by the Nazi regime. The world was left with only that single, haunting black and white photograph, a pale echo of a masterpiece consumed by history. Block 3. Rediscovery, record sale. For 99 years, the portrait of Fräulein Leser was a ghost story whispered by art historians. Then, in early 2024, the ghost materialized. An Austrian law firm representing the anonymous current owners of the painting contacted the Viennese auction house Imkinski. They had in their possession a lost masterpiece by Gustav Klimt. The news sent shockwaves through the art world. A work known only from a single black and white photograph, a painting that had survived the inferno of the Second World War, had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The family that owned it claimed it had been in their private collections since the 1960s, passed down through inheritance. But the crucial period, from its disappearance after 1925 to its acquisition in the 60s, was a complete blank. The detective story was just beginning. The first step was authentication. How could they be certain this was the real thing? The process was a fascinating blend of art historical scholarship and modern science. Experts, including Dr. Tobias Natter, one of the world's foremost Klimt authorities, meticulously examined the painting. They analyzed Klimt's distinctive brushwork, the way he built up layers of paint to create such vibrant, living surfaces. The canvas, the stretcher, and the pigments were all subjected to scientific analysis to ensure they were consistent with the materials Klimt used in 1917. Crucially, they compared it to the 1925 photograph. Every detail, from the sitter's gaze to the specific folds in her floral shawl, matched perfectly. The verdict was unanimous. This was, without a doubt, the long-lost portrait of Fräulein Leser. The ghost had a body, and it was more breathtakingly beautiful than anyone had imagined. But authentication was the easy part. The real challenge was untangling its provenance, the painting's chain of ownership. This is where the story becomes a complex ethical and legal drama. The auction house's research uncovered a crucial, if troubling, clue. A label on the back of the painting suggested it may have been acquired by a known Nazi merchant during the war. However, there was no definitive proof of how he acquired it. Was it a forced sale? Was it looted after Henrietta Leser was deported? The records were gone, destroyed by the chaos of war, or deliberately obscured. This gaping hole in its history put everyone involved in a difficult position. This is where a set of international guidelines known as the Washington Principles on Nazi-confiscated art came into play. Established in 1998 and endorsed by over 40 countries, these principles are not legally binding laws, but a moral framework. They urge institutions and individuals to identify art confiscated by the Nazis and to achieve a just and fair solution with the heirs of the original owners. In the case of the Leser portrait, the Leser family's legal successors were identified across the world. Given the lack of concrete proof of theft, which would be required for a formal legal restitution claim in many jurisdictions, a straightforward return of the painting was not possible. Instead, guided by the spirit of the Washington Principles, the current owners and the Leser heirs reached a private agreement. They would sell the painting at auction and split the proceeds. It was a pragmatic solution to an impossible historical problem, a compromise that acknowledged the suffering of the past while dealing with the legal realities of the present. In April 2024, the portrait of Fräulein Leser went up for auction. The event was charged with historical weight. This wasn't just another art sale. It was the culmination of a century-long story of creation, loss, and rediscovery. Bidding was intense, and the final hammer fell at a staggering 30 million euros, or about $32 million. While an enormous sum, it was actually below the initial high estimate of 50 million euros. Some speculate the unresolved questions in its provenance may have given some potential institutional buyers pause. The sale of the Leser portrait closes one chapter while opening many more. Its rediscovery is a miracle, a priceless piece of cultural history returned from the void. But it is also a somber reminder of everything that was lost. For every masterpiece that resurfaces, there are thousands more that were destroyed or remain missing, their stories untold. The journey of this painting, from Klimt's vibrant studio through the darkness of the Holocaust to the glare of a modern auction room, is a powerful echo of modern history. It forces us to confront the enduring legacy of war, the complexities of justice, and the profound power of art to survive, to bear witness, and to demand.